All right. All right. Let me knock this out real quick. Get this done. Oh, by the way, hello viewers. Another beautiful day. Hope your five senses work. Health and strength is good or excellent. All right. Listen to this. New Linux kernel release. More inside. It says Linux 6.15 kernel release. This is what's new. It's kernel release weekend with Linux 6.15 fresh on the scene, backed by a hefty collection of improvements as well as a few changes which have proved a tad divisive amongst developers. Linus Torvald announced the stable release of Linux 6.15 stable on Linux kernel mailing list, LKML. In this trademark lazy fairy style, noting that nothing looks particularly scary in the final push, so he's happy to sign off. Various random small fixes over with drivers as usual accounting for most of it, but we got some BCA chef fixes, some core networking, and some fixes in there too, he notes. He says, for a whip through some of the highlights this new kernel brings, reads on, Linux 6.15 new features. I will start with something small that does not affect the day-to-day desktop Linux experience yet, but will likely have a sizable impact in the months and years to come. The Linux 6.15 brings an initial foundational stub for Nova, which is aiming to be successor to Novi, the open source NVIDIA graphics driver. This one aims at newest GSP-based GPUs. As 10 du jour, the Nova driver is written in Rust. While it is very early with no display size driver yet, this is an exciting development, not to mention something many may be keen to watch evolve in light of the long, often tumultuous history of NVIDIA support on Linux. Meanwhile, XE graphics driver continues to mature. It now supports shared virtual memory SVM adds, device wedge, events reporting to notify user space when the GPU is unresponsive, and can report GPU and VRAM temperatures for ARC GPU in HWMON. Key kerneling says Linux 6.15 introduced a number of significant but controversial changes. This first is the new FWCTL subsystem, a controversial addition that has had something of a bumpy road prior to this mainline inclusion, which comes with initial driver for CXL device, MLX5 network adapters, and AMD Radeon Pensando distributed service cards. This new network allows for defined remote procedures called RPC to framework, which stands to standardize the ways device firmware can be configured, updated, and debugged securely in user space. And then it says they'll merge a security change in the I/O Uring subsystem drew criticism from Linus Torvald. Says here, while potential boon to firmware updating on Linux seems clear, some opponents consider the approach a tough OOP not following the standard kernel development process, and that pre-existing API could be used instead. Sticking with controversial changes to make it in a new security hook, the I/O Uring subsystem ships in Linux 6.15 despite heated criticism from Linus Torvald himself, who questioned its purpose and the complexity it adds. The aim of this hook is noble, to improve security by giving SE Linux the ability to apply policy control to different kinds of data that is read by the kernel. Both of these highlights the healthy tension kernel development sees as the balance of innovation and pending convention meets the need to adhere to establish our practices. And then it says in all blue, zero copy received lets network packets data go direct to users space memory. It says here, one less contentious note, Linux 6.15 adds support for zero copy received. And then it says via IO underscore Uring, the kernel interface for synchronous IOs operation, potentially improving performance in network-heavy apps, tasks, and workloads. Zero copy receives let network packet data go direct to user space memory without usual memory copying overhead. Unlike existing zero copy solution, ZCRX is said not to acquire memory alignment or complicated M-maps operation, making it easier to use. Then it says there's plan to extend reception directly into device memory too. Linux 6.15 sees its networking stack gain a new TCP socket option. That's TCP underscore RTO underscore max underscore MX to offer greater control over connection timeout, reattempt duration for IPv4 connection, which could aid those working on especially flaky connections. A new API for receiving information on file system mount/unmount events via Fay Notify is also present. This will, in time, if used, allow application to monitor file system mount change in real time and respond or inform accordingly. Rounding it out, the block layer supports hardware wrap encryption keys, allowing the kernel to put encryption keys into a block device without keeping the key in memory. Given worst case scenario, it could be read from memory by an attacker. File system and changes. And then it says every new Linux kernel release includes a glut of file system improvement, and Linux 6.15 is no exception. And then it says Fuse can now enforce timeouts and handy when blue SSH files hang. It says here, among the more notable changes, Linux 6.15 permits Fuse, the file system in user space subsystem, to enforce timeouts on unresponsive user-space servers and handle file names longer than 1024 characters. That's 1024 characters, meaning 1 megabyte. Says there, this should help mitigate hangs when, for example, SSH file system become unresponsive. Handy. And then it says a standout performance improvement concern exFAT file system in Linux 6.15. Deleting files on exFAT file system is significantly faster thanks to optimization contributed by a developer at Sony. When set to use the disk card mount option, which tell the file system to inform storage device when blocks are no longer needed. Deleting an 80 gig file was massively faster, down from 4 minutes to a mere 1.6 seconds. The ever popular BTRFS file system see notable updates in 6.15, among which the file system now falls back to buffer writes when direct I/O is attempted on file requiring checksum, which will reduce the number of checksum mismatch error in virtual machines. BTRFS adds support for faster and real-time ZSTD compression level -15 to -1, aimed at improving overall speed, albeit at reduced compression ratios. Defrag IOCTL has been tweaked to accept these negative compression values. Finally, work on BAC chefs, a new copy space on space write file system, continues apace. A new scrub functionality support finding and repairing file system errors, while support for block size larger than the system page size is now available. Then it says ARM and RISC-V. As with every kernel release, ARM and RISC-V hardware support continues to expand in Linux 6.15, with the bulk of support concerning industrial, embedded, and edge devices. but there are a few notable changes for devices that ought to be familiar to regular users, including a new device tree for the Google Pixel 6 Pro GS101 and basic support for the Allwinner A523 device, as some differ only slightly, making this sort of catch-all template tree. On the RISC-V side, Linux 6.15 brings support for the new Milk V Jupyter ITX board and support for the BF Load 16 floating point extension, as well as new ZBKB, ZAMO, and ZAL RSC extension. Yeah, Linux 6.15. And then it says device and driver support. Linux 6.15 includes a pair of drivers that bring support for the Apple Touch Bar on Intel MacBook Pros, along with a separate driver to support touch bars in Apple M1 and M2 MacBook Pros. Apple dropped it from M3 models onward. This support looks on paper expansive. Backlight touch interaction showing function keys, or where supported, showing other kind of information. A new Samsung Galaxy Book driver brings MISC enablement for users running Linux on one, including working ACPI platform, profile battery charge, threshold/limiting, and function keys handling. The Sony PlayStation 5 controller works better on Linux 6.15, while Moza Racing, Camus, and various other racing/flight simulator devices benefit from update to the HID PID-FF force feedback driver. Sticking with controllers, the modestly priced Xbox Turtle Beach Recon Stealth Ultra controller have been added to the XPad driver, along with the popular powered A-wired controller for Xbox. Got a device with Intel Killer E5000 Ethernet. It's now supported in Linux 6.15. The addition requires a single line of code, since the Intel Killer E5000 is a rebranded Realtek RTL L8126. Beyond that, subtopic, aside from the above highlights, a few other changes Linux 6.15 which caught my eye. Pseudo file system convert to new mount API. Fetch process exit status through PID-FD even once reaped. Optional memory mapping sealing for security hardening. A perf subsystem can perform latency profiling. XFS file system gains support on zoned storage devices. New trace off _after boot option is disable tracing after boot. And then it says scheduler changes includes a new default idle CPU selection logic, new Qualcomm IRS video decoder driver H.264 only, Rust new abstraction, Unix test macro, ARM v7 support, Python 3.9 plus is now required for working with kernel code / documentation. Then it says, for more detail on this release, see the comprehensive merge report recap, part 1 and part 2 from the wonderful folks at LWN, are poured over the kernel commit directly. I should note my focus when covering Linux kernel release is rarely on the bring up for next generation CPUs and GPUs, since those are yet to be released and not widely in use by regular Linux users. That process is perpetual, reassuring to know, but a given. Take it as read that next gen and next after next gen Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA CPU and GPU continues to be supported piece by piece while they're in development. Get Linux 6.15. In all, another set of welcome improvement to Linux kernel that's all of us will benefit from. Whether it's a specific hardware enablement we're aware of, or a lower level optimization we're not. Ubuntu users will need to wait a bit longer to benefit from these changes officially. Linux 6.15 won't arrive as an automatic software update for Ubuntu users. Ubuntu 24.4 LTS users can expect to receive a new kernel, Linux 6.13 in July, backport from Ubuntu 25.04. However, for the plucky, there are unofficial ways to install new kernel release on Ubuntu, albeit paired with the usual caveat, caution, and concern regarding third-party PPA, random debs, and the fact that you're on your own if things go wrong. And that is that. Now, what do we got in the comment section? 2 comments. Flying Cake said this: as is tended de jure, the Nova driver is written in Rust. These Rust fanboys pushing Rust into every part of the Linux kernel is going to ruin it. Writing GPU drivers in Rust makes 0 sense. You need raw pointers to device registers for GPU drivers, and Rust does not allow this. Does not allow this. So you need to write unsafe Rust, which defeats the whole point of Rust. All of this Rust code in the kernel is going to be an utter nightmare to maintain. You do not want to use high complex language like Rust. That is for 2 verbose tons of boilerplate and has a complex ownership model for a Linux kernel that is not properly centralized, but has to be maintained by many people, most of whom will never learn Rust. And then Flying Cakes, he said this again. He came back, he said this: it should be also a reminder that if Rust will succeed is a very big question mark. I do not think it will. We are now extremely good at catching issues in C code, especially with the help of AI. Static analyzer and fuzzy testing can easily catch C memory issues, making Rust a pointless language that is unnecessarily complex. These Rust fanboys are going to cause a disaster in code that will become unmaintainable because no one will learn it. No one will learn it? Well, you got about 7 to 8 billion people on the earth, so some people out that 7 to 8 billion will probably try to learn it if they got the time, so yeah. But C and C is getting more popular now as far as like coding goes. But as far as all this though, another update for you Linux kernel users and you experts with the Linux Linux kernel you experts in that are very experienced with Linux kernels. Have fun with this one. We'll leave all the links in the description box, and the article. And we only got 2 comments so far. This thing came out about 5 hours ago, so actually I was at a little gathering, and then actually after that I was actually gaming, and I gamed after that, and I just came in and saw this, and I said, you know what, let me jump all over it and get this out of the way. But other than that, man, yeah, another update for you Linux kernel experts, and see, here's what here are the new features though. As far as like what they say, they got a lot of controls updates to this one, but they have pseudo file system convert to new mount API, fetch process exit status through PID FD even once, reaped, and it says optional memory mapping sealing for security hardening. Perf subsystem can perform latency profile. XF file system gain support for zone storage device. New trace off _after_boot option disable tracing after boot schedulers change. And then it says, including a new default idle CPU selection logic, new Qualcomm Iris video decoder, H.264 only, Rust new abstraction units, test macro ARM v7 support, Python 3.9 plus is not required for working with kernel code / documentation. So you Python experts, this is going to benefit you a lot. But yeah, another update, to the Linux kernel. I think on the next go around they're gonna the next one gonna be more CPU and GPU focused. So whenever that one comes out, I'll definitely read it to you. But other than that, you guys are good. Now for you Ubuntu users, yeah, and for that are experienced with the Linux kernel, you know what to do. Yeah, you should have no issues with this, or if you have issues, report it. Yeah. What we got here? We got about latest comments. Somebody said, says, I am not a fan of Genome, but I absolutely. And then who is this? Doris said this. Whoa, hold up. He said four Zen do is being ported to Linux. That's exciting. And then Linux Gamer said this. As stated, NVIDIA are working on it. It's no good. And then William says this. This is why I go through the process of making. Anyway, but yeah, but other than that, man, a new update to the Linux kernel. So I'm sure after this, Linus Torvald is going to come out and he's going to start. He's going to before the next kernel comes out, he's going to have some things to say, and then when the next kernel comes out, then it should be more CPU and GPU focused. So yeah, but yeah, have fun with this one, folks. That's all I can tell you on this. We only got 2 comments so far, so yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna leave this video for y'all to enjoy. It. Nice talking to you people again. Chris, still Star Wars 30 thing. Dark side. Go home. Peace.